What if everything you believed about power, perseverance, and success came down to 6 very strange foods? The room was silent except for the hum of machines and the faint tick of a digital clock on the wall. Elon Musk sat slouched in a leather chair at Tesla headquarters, staring blankly at a glowing spreadsheet that had long since stopped making sense. Numbers blurred into one another, stock trends dipped like free-falling rockets, and his right leg throbbed, again. It wasn't pain exactly. Not sharp. More like an ache, a fatigue that settled deep into his bones, like cement drying slowly inside his muscles. He rubbed his knee absently, then winced when the movement triggered a twinge up his thigh. Strange. He'd felt invincible just a few years ago. Now, it was like his own body was pushing back. He looked at the untouched espresso on the table. The caffeine didn't help anymore. Meditation didn't help. Not even the cold plunges or the sleep pod in the corner of his office. "Is this it?" he whispered. "Is this the beginning of the end?" His assistant, Marcy, appeared in the doorway, holding a tablet. "Board meeting in 5, Elon. You good?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up, slowly, and felt a brief, sharp reminder that something in his lower body was definitely not okay. He masked the wince with a thin smile. "Yeah. Tell them I'll be there in 6. Marcy hesitated. "You sure? You're limping a little." He waved her off. "Just walked too far on Mars this morning." She laughed, unsure if it was a joke. With Elon, you never really knew. As the door shut behind her, he turned to the window, watching a gull dive down toward the Tesla test lot. His reflection stared back at him, tired eyes, hunched shoulders, legs slightly trembling under the weight of something heavier than gravity. He whispered again, "What if I really can't keep up anymore?" That question haunted him. Not just because of what it meant for him, but because of what it meant for everything he had built. If his body was breaking down, how could he lead missions to Mars? Drive the development of AI? Take humans beyond the limits of imagination? But that's when he remembered something. A conversation he had brushed off months ago. Dr. Lexa Monroe. She had approached him at a sustainability summit in Zurich, pitching what sounded like a diet plan mixed with sci-fi. 6 foods, she'd said. That's all it takes to rebuild the core, especially your legs. He'd laughed at the time. You think food's going to power Mars? She'd smiled back. No. But it'll power the man who powers Mars. He never called her back. Until now. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to the very bottom of his contact list, past Jeff Bezos, past Grimes, even past a contact labeled, "Do Not Text, Time Travel Guy," and tapped on the name. Dr. Lexa Monroe, Nutritional Neuroscience and Bioperformance Optimization. He hit call. After 3 rings, a calm, confident voice answered. Elon Musk. Finally ready to listen. He didn't skip a beat. "I think my legs are trying to retire without me." "I told you they would," she said. "But it's not too late." There was a beat of silence. "What do you want to fix first, your muscles, your mitochondria, or your mindset?" He leaned against the window, the weight of the day heavy in his knees, his calves, even his heels. "Start with the legs," he said. "If they go, the rest of me won't be far behind." Elon sat on the edge of his bed, barefoot, in his quiet Bel Air home. His legs were stretched out in front of him, and for once, he was looking at them not as tools or inconveniences, but as battlegrounds. He remembered how those legs had walked him into investor meetings with $0 in his bank account. How they'd stood through countless rocket test launches, trembling each time. How they'd carried him into births, breakups, breakthroughs. And now, they felt like ticking time bombs. Dr. Monroe's message came through. "I'll be there tomorrow morning. No caffeine. Empty stomach. Bring curiosity." He stared at the screen. For a moment, he almost smiled. This wasn't a PR stunt. This wasn't a biohacking phase or a billionaire trend. This was survival. The question echoed again in his mind. What if everything you believed about power, perseverance, and success came down to 6 very strange foods? Outside, the moon hung low over the Pacific. Inside, Elon Musk, dreamer, builder, rule-breaker, was about to discover a new frontier. One bite at a time. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Years before billion-dollar valuations, viral tweets, and interplanetary ambitions, there was just a skinny boy in Pretoria, South Africa, awkward, quiet, and perpetually bruised. Elon Musk wasn't the kind of kid who played soccer with friends after school. He was the kind who ducked behind library shelves, buried his nose in Isaac Asimov, and whispered to himself about building machines that could take humans to Mars. At age 9, he was already reading college-level physics textbooks. At age 10, he learned how to code. But brilliance is rarely a shield, and never in middle school. Every day at Bryanston Primary was a battlefield. Elon was different, and kids could smell different like wolves smell fear. He walked differently. Talked differently. Thought differently. And they didn't like it. The worst day came in 7th grade. They cornered him in the locker room, 3 of them. No names needed. Elon never forgot their faces. He still remembered how the fluorescent lights above buzzed as he hit the cold concrete floor, blood dripping from his nose. His legs had given out that day, not from injury, but from fear. And that fear calcified into something cold and permanent. He didn't tell his mom. He didn't tell anyone. Instead, he made a decision that would echo for decades. If I can't outrun them, I'll outthink them. If I can't be stronger now, I'll build a future where I am. His mother, May Musk, had always called him her silent storm. Elegant, poised, and brilliant in her own right, she was a model and nutritionist who taught Elon 2 things: 1, never ignore your curiosity, and 2, you can feed your strength. Literally. Their kitchen wasn't like other homes. While other kids were drinking soda, Elon was handed wheatgrass shots. No junk food. No soda. No excuses. Your body, she'd say, isn't just a vessel, it's the engine of your future. He didn't know it yet, but those words would return years later, right when he needed them most. By the time Elon hit his teens, he'd become a kind of soft-spoken storm cloud, electric, intense, and impossible to ignore once you got close. But getting close wasn't easy. Even his younger brother, Kimball, would say later in interviews. You could be sitting right next to Elon, and still feel like you were in another galaxy. The only one who ever truly cracked him open. His first great love, Justine. They met at Queen's University in Ontario, Canada. Elon, now 18, had just escaped South Africa, a suitcase full of books and a heart full of ambition. He was still lanky. Still awkward. Still driven by a hunger that couldn't be explained by ambition alone. Justine was different. A writer, sharp-tongued and fearless. She didn't care about money or fame. She liked the way he spoke about the stars like they were old friends. One night, in the middle of winter, they sat under the campus clock tower, legs dangling off a concrete ledge. You ever think about the body? She asked, blowing into her scarf. He blinked. The body? Yeah. Everyone talks about the mind. Your mind's clearly from another planet. But your body, it's like you ignore it. He frowned. What does it matter if the mind's strong? Because it has to live inside the body, Elon. He didn't answer. But he remembered that night like a blueprint etched into his brain. After college, Elon went full throttle. Zip2. PayPal. Tesla. SpaceX. Neuralink. Starlink. One after another, ideas exploded into reality. But something strange began happening as the years passed. He forgot about his legs. He forgot how often they ached after 16-hour days standing on launch pads. He forgot how many times he limped off stages, smiling through a pain no one noticed. He forgot how that fear in the locker room had never quite left, just evolved into exhaustion. Until it all came rushing back that night in Tesla HQ. When his legs shook, unprompted. When the pain spoke louder than the ambition. And he realized, he had ignored the very foundation he stood on. The call to Dr. Lexa Monroe wasn't just about nutrition. It was about coming full circle. About facing a fear buried in 7th grade blood and concrete. About understanding that even the most advanced brain still needed legs strong enough to carry it. Because without them, there would be no rockets. No Mars. No future. And deep down, Elon knew. You can only run from your past until your legs give out. That night, back in his home, Elon scrolled through an old photo album on his tablet. One picture stopped him. A black and white shot of a young boy, legs skinny, glasses too big, sitting on a school bench with a bruise under his eye. He stared at it for a long moment, then whispered, "Don't worry. I've got us now." It's not burnout. It's breakdown. The brain runs on passion, but the body runs on fuel. Elon Musk had long believed he could outthink biology. If he could bend physics, master machine learning, and build rockets reusable like Lego sets, surely his body would just keep up. But sitting alone in his private Tesla Model X, parked outside his Bel Air home, reality hit differently. His right leg was twitching, spasms, sharp and involuntary. His calf felt like it had been cranked tight by an invisible wrench. He reached down and massaged it, hard, like he could will it back into submission. "Come on," he muttered. "Not now. Not when we're this close." This close was the Mars window, launching the first fully civilian transport to orbit the red planet. It was supposed to happen in 148 days. But Elon knew, if he couldn't walk 10 minutes without his legs going numb, what made him think he could lead humanity off Earth? He hated the word fragile. It felt like weakness. But there it was, glaring at him through the pulse of pain behind his knee. That night, Lexa Monroe arrived with no fanfare. She stepped out of an unmarked matte black SUV, dressed in practical black jeans and a Patagonia jacket. Her presence was magnetic, not because of style, but precision. She carried a suitcase like a spy from a Bourne film. Elon greeted her at the door with a raised eyebrow. "I expected more herbs and crystals," he joked. She didn't laugh. "You called me because you're breaking down. Not because you want a turmeric latte." He stepped aside. "Fair." Inside, she set up shop in his kitchen, clearing out half the fridge, placing glass containers labeled in a looping, almost surgical handwriting. Then she pulled out a small device, part tablet, part biometric scanner. "What is that?" Elon asked. "Your body's truth serum," she said. "It reads stress patterns, inflammatory markers, glucose spikes, neuromuscular efficiency, and..." "I get it. It's a health snitch." She smirked. "Basically." Lexa pressed the scanner against his wrist. A cool buzz. Then it beeped. Her eyes scanned the results. She didn't sugarcoat. "Elon, your legs are screaming for help. Inflammatory markers through the roof. Your mitochondria are performing like a 70-year-old marathon runner, who just lost the race." Elon leaned against the kitchen island. "I always thought I could push through anything. Just willpower." "You can't willpower your legs into recovery," she said. "You need real fuel. The right kind. Starting now." She handed him a small jar, neon green, with a strange jelly-like substance inside. "Is this radioactive?" She rolled her eyes. "It's cactus jam." He blinked. Seriously? This is step 1 of 6. Nopal cactus from Oaxaca, Mexico. It regulates blood sugar, reduces inflammation, and accelerates neuromuscular repair. But more importantly, it starts reconnecting the brain with the body. Elon raised an eyebrow. Are you saying I'm disconnected? Lexa didn't answer. She didn't have to. He dipped a spoon in. Tasted it. Tart. Earthy. A bit like sour kiwi mixed with mud and magic. Not bad. The next morning, for the first time in months, Elon walked instead of taking the Tesla down to the R&D lab. Just 10 minutes through the upper levels of his LA compound. But something was different. The twitch was gone. The numbness didn't flare up. His legs didn't sing yet, but they weren't screaming either. In the elevator, he stared at his reflection in the chrome. Maybe this was real. Maybe this food thing, this cellular, muscular, nervous system reset, wasn't just hippie nutrition talk. Maybe there was more to the human machine than even he had dared to quantify. That same afternoon, he walked into a Tesla design review. He didn't say much, he just stood, pacing behind the design team, scanning the prototype for the next roadster. Then someone noticed. Elon, said Jenna, one of the lead engineers. You're walking again. He paused. Was I not before? You usually sit the whole time, she said. And when you do stand, you lean. Like a lot. He hadn't realized it. Until now. He smiled, just barely. New software upgrade, he said. Internal hardware patch pending. They laughed. It wasn't a big moment. Not to them. But to Elon. It was seismic. Later that night, Lexa ran another scan. Something's changed, she said. This fast. That's rare. I didn't expect the jam to be magic. It's not magic, she said. It's science. And maybe a little surrender. He glanced up. Surrender? To the idea that you can't think your way out of everything, she said. You're not just a brain on a stick, Elon. You're a whole system. He stared at the ceiling, the weight of the past few years pressing down like gravity. All this time, he murmured, I treated my body like a support unit for my mind. Lexa nodded. Now you're learning, it's a partner, not a servant. The next day, Elon woke up at 4:50 a.m., not to an alarm, but to a sensation he hadn't felt in a long time. Readiness. His feet hit the floor. Firm. Steady. Not pain-free. But stable. He looked out over the hills of Los Angeles as the sun rose, a slow amber glow across the Pacific. He didn't know where this food journey would lead. But he knew one thing. If he was going to change the world again, his legs had to come with him. You can't launch rockets on a crumbling launch pad. Elon stood in the Tesla gym. Yes, the company had its own gym, tucked between the engineering lab and the meditation room, because balance. Sweat dripped from his forehead. His arms trembled slightly under the barbell. But it wasn't upper body day. No, today was all legs. 2 more reps, the trainer said. Elon exhaled through gritted teeth. If I don't survive this, tell Lexa her cactus jam is a scam. Come on, man. You run a space company. You can squat a couple plates. He pushed through, one slow, steady rep, then one more. Legs trembling, lungs heaving, he dropped the bar into the rack and staggered back. His head was spinning, but something in his legs, something deep in the fibers, felt alive. The progress was undeniable. It had only been a week since Dr. Lexa Monroe's arrival and the introduction of the first food, Nopal cactus jam. And while Elon wasn't deadlifting Teslas or jumping over Cybertrucks, yet, he was recovering faster, standing longer, and feeling things he hadn't felt in years. The old Elon was starting to reboot, version 2.0. So when Lexa texted, "Food number 2 is ready. Come hungry," he dropped everything. Her lab wasn't far, just a modified Airstream trailer parked quietly in a remote corner of the Tesla solar testing facility. Sleek, silver, and humming with quiet tech. Inside, it felt like stepping into the future. Glass vials glowed under LED strips. Small screens tracked biological data in real time. The air smelled faintly like mint, ozone, and something earthy. Lexa stood in the center, holding a black ceramic bowl. "This," she said, "is where the real transformation begins." Elon peered inside. A golden, glistening scoop of something gelatinous sat in the bowl, surrounded by shavings of dark green leaves. It looked like sushi from another dimension. "What is it?" "Uni." He blinked. "As in, sea urchin?" "Specifically, sea urchin roe," she said. "Delicacy in Japan. Rich in omega-3s, dopamine precursors, and rare neuroactive peptides. It promotes emotional clarity, muscular responsiveness, and neuromuscular harmony." He raised an eyebrow. "So, you're saying sea urchin makes me smarter and gives me better legs?" "I'm saying it helps your brain talk to your body," she replied. "Efficiently. Which, let's be honest, you've never really let happen." He chuckled. "Fair." He picked up a small tasting spoon and scooped the uni. It was cold. Creamy. Salty. A hint of brine and butter. It was also, weirdly good. Elon closed his eyes. The flavor lingered, but more than that, something shifted inside him. Not dramatically. Not instantly. But a small thread of tension between his shoulders released. The tightness behind his knees faded. His jaw unclenched. He opened his eyes. "I feel like my nervous system just rebooted." Lexa smiled. "Welcome to phase 2. Over the next few days, the transformation accelerated. Elon began waking up without the usual crack and creak routine. His first steps out of bed were steady, smooth, even strong. He caught himself jogging up the Tesla Design Center stairs instead of taking the elevator. At a SpaceX meeting, he stood for 2 straight hours at the conference table, pacing like a general. The team noticed. Elon, Gwynne Shotwell, COO of SpaceX, said half-jokingly. "You trying to walk to Mars now?" He grinned. "I just might." But progress didn't come without friction. Not everyone was on board with Elon's new body-first philosophy. Some execs at Tesla and Neuralink whispered behind closed doors, worried he was losing focus. Spending too much time with that food doctor. Pulling away from the hard tech, the strategy, the empire. Lexa warned him. "You're changing. People don't like change they don't control." He shrugged. "They'll adapt. Or I'll build new people." She smirked. Spoken like a man who definitely hasn't outsourced emotional intelligence yet. He paused, then said, "Hey. I'm trying. That sea urchin made me feel things." They both laughed. One night, Elon walked alone through the Tesla battery plant. No entourage. No media. Just rows of humming machines and warehouse lights buzzing above. He stood in the middle of the floor, arms crossed, thinking. Thinking about how much of his life had been output, technology, performance, numbers. But how little had been input. For years, he had fed his mind, but starved his body. Expected it to perform miracles with instant noodles, Red Bull, and 5 hours of sleep. Now, he was learning a new equation. What you feed fuels what you build. He looked down at his legs. "Legs of steel," he whispered. He didn't mean it as a metaphor. He meant it as a mission. The next morning, he surprised Lexa. "Schedule me for leg day. Every 3 days. And bring whatever's next." She raised an eyebrow. "You want food number 3 already?" I want more than that, he said. I want this body, this system, to be as cutting edge as the ships I'm building. She nodded. Then get ready. Because the next one smells like death. He paused. You always know how to sell it. Sometimes the worst-smelling cure brings the cleanest reset. The box arrived in the dead of night. No label. No branding. Just a matte white case with a tiny black biohazard symbol in the corner. Elon knew immediately, Lexa had leveled up. Inside Tesla HQ, the team was used to late-night drop-ins, testing battery density, debugging drive units, recalibrating AI. But this wasn't about tech. This was something wilder. He opened the lid. A thick, aggressive wave of stench hit the room like a punch in the face. Elon staggered back, hands over his nose. Eyes watering. Oh my, what the hell is that? He barked. Lexa, standing at the entrance with gloves on, grinned like a Bond villain. Welcome to Hakarl. He gasped. Is this a prank? She stepped forward, casually lifting a tiny glass jar from the box. Inside, bite-sized cubes of something pale, gelatinous, and vaguely threatening. This, she said, is fermented Greenland shark. Straight from Iceland. Buried in volcanic sand for 6 weeks, then hung to dry. It's one of the most ammonia-rich, protein-dense foods on the planet. It smells like a tire fire wrapped in cat pee, Elon gagged. Correct. And it just might save your joints. Why the shark? Elon asked that same question once the nausea wore off. Lexa pulled up a diagram on her tablet. Tendons. Ligaments. Muscle fibers. Nerve endings. It looked like a blueprint for a war machine. Your knees, she explained, are weak because your joints are inflamed. Your connective tissue's screaming for help. This food flushes built-up uric acid, boosts collagen formation, and, most importantly, stimulates a primal gut-brain response. A what? Think of it as a hard reset for the immune system. The body sees the shark, panics, then reboots everything. He stared at the jar. Okay, he said finally. But if I puke, you owe me dinner. Rubbery. Sour. With a back-of-the-throat chemical burn that made his eyes twitch. It wasn't food, it was punishment. Lexa handed him a cube. He chewed once. Regretted everything. Chewed again. Swallowed. I hate you, he muttered. Good, she said. That means it's working. But within 15 minutes, something strange happened. Clarity. Not mental, but cellular. His limbs felt warmer. Blood flow returned to his hands, his feet. The ache behind his knees began to fade, not in a dramatic, TV commercial kind of way, but in a noticeable, real way. Like someone had unscrewed a pressure valve deep inside his joints. He stood up from the lab bench and walked across the room. No twinge. No limp. He turned. Walked back. Faster this time. Lexa was watching, arms folded. You feel it, don't you? He nodded slowly. It's like, my legs aren't dragging anymore. That night, he took a full 30-minute walk through his private hillside compound. No car. No scooter. Just legs, steps, breath. For the first time in years, his walk didn't feel like something to endure, it felt like momentum. He found himself at the far edge of his property, overlooking the valley. Stars overhead. Crickets buzzing. A coyote howled in the distance. He pulled out his phone. Took a voice note. Day 12. Shark food changed everything. Legs are waking up. I don't know if this is placebo, but I don't care. If I can walk, stand, think, this clearly. I'll eat whatever she tells me. He paused, then added. Also, note to self, find mint gum. Lots of it. At SpaceX, people started noticing more than just his stride. Elon, are you working out again? One intern asked. Your posture's different, a neural engineer said. Even Franz, Tesla's notoriously blunt head of design, cornered him in the studio. You look sharper. Less haunted, he said. It's weirding people out. Elon laughed. Shark meat, he replied. You should try it. Franz blinked. Is that a new protein bar? But not everyone was impressed. Back at Neuralink, one of the senior advisors pulled Elon aside. Elon, he said cautiously, are we really investing time in food? This isn't food, Elon replied. This is fuel. The old me? He was half charged. This version? I'm upgrading every cell. You think this is scalable? You think this changes the game? Elon's eyes sparked. If it works for me, it'll work for others. Athletes. Soldiers. Engineers pulling 20-hour shifts. Space colonists. Everyone. He leaned in. If the body fails, the mission fails. I'm not building tech anymore. I'm building capacity. By the end of week 2, the results were undeniable. White heavy checkmark daily pain, gone. White heavy checkmark mobility, plus 30%. White heavy checkmark sleep quality, deep REM. White heavy checkmark mood, annoyingly stable, according to Marcy, his assistant. And just before sunrise on day 14, he did something insane. He ran. Not far, just 200 meters up a slope behind his house. But it was real. No assist. No limp. He ran. He stopped at the top, hands on knees, lungs burning, a stupid grin on his face. Then he whispered. Let's see what food number 4 can do. If it's banned, it probably works too well. The storm hit the same day Lexa brought the route. A literal one, sheets of rain hammering Los Angeles, thunder grumbling over Elon's solar-paneled hillside, but also a digital one. Social media was lit up like a Christmas tree on fire. Hashtag Elon Goes Primal was trending. A clip had leaked of him eating Hakarl on a steel bench at Tesla HQ, face half contorted in horror. Someone added a soundtrack. Memes exploded. Shark Lord of Silicon Valley. CEO of Stink. Elon Musk, iron legs, rotten lunch. He didn't flinch. Elon had weathered worse. But the bigger storm came behind closed doors, investors. Board members, analysts, even a few loyal engineers began whispering. Is this a midlife crisis? Has Lexa turned him into some kind of food cultist? Why is the most advanced mind on Earth chewing on prehistoric seafood and talking about leg clarity? The real question was, why weren't they? Lexa, unfazed by the headlines, showed up at Elon's lab that night with a vacuum-sealed satchel. This, she said, is ashwagandha negra. Black ashwagandha. Wild grown. From the edges of Bhutan, where the altitude crushes weaker plants and the roots grow twisted. It's banned in most countries for causing temporary euphoria, nerve stimulation, and radical hormonal shifts. Elon squinted. Sounds like the good stuff. It's been used for centuries by monks training to fast for 40 days straight. Helps the body heal faster. Deepens muscle fiber density. Speeds neural repair. He eyed the shriveled black root in her gloved hands. It looked like something torn from the earth by ancient witches. How do you eat it? He asked. You don't. She tossed it into a blender. Added 2 ounces of goat kefir, a drop of lion's mane tincture, and a small slice of raw turmeric root. The result, a thick, dark gold elixir that smelled like an old forest after rain. She handed it to him. Sip it slow. Then don't talk for 30 minutes. He drank. The taste hit hard, like soil, honey, and battery acid had made peace in his mouth. Then the silence. Then the shift. 28 minutes later, he was standing on the Tesla test track, barefoot in the rain. His legs didn't feel like legs. They felt like instruments. Every nerve seemed lit. Every movement more precise. He squatted. Jumped. Then sprinted. Not just ran, sprinted, like a man escaping extinction. Lexa stood under an umbrella, watching him circle the track like a madman in a $500 hoodie and no shoes. When he stopped, he walked straight up to her, soaked and grinning. "This is it," he said. "Whatever this is, it unlocked something." The science came fast after that. Lexa documented everything: bone density up 6%, blood flow to extremities up 22%, cortisol down 18%, testosterone levels up 31%. But it wasn't just stats. Elon's mind was moving cleaner. His mood had leveled out. His short temper was gone. His pacing during meetings had rhythm instead of nervous energy. His legs, the weakness that had started this whole thing, were no longer a liability. They were the engine. Then came the leak. Somebody inside Neuralink had shared part of Lexa's confidential food protocol, a snippet that included phrases like forbidden roots, extreme neural modulation, and unregulated hormonal elevation. Headlines flared. Musk on mind drugs. Tech genius eats banned roots to hack brain. Biohacker billionaire or biohazard. Regulators from the FDA started sniffing around. Lexa was put on a watch list. Tesla's legal team called it reckless dietary experimentation. Elon. He welcomed the fire. In a rare tweet, he wrote, "If you're afraid of nature outperforming pharma, maybe you're not ready for Mars." It got 8.4 million likes. But behind the scenes, the pressure mounted. A call came from a high-ranking official, unnamed, but serious. "Elon," the voice said, "you're playing with unknown compounds. You're an icon. Kids are watching you. We need you to slow down." He responded simply. "What's more dangerous? Trying to optimize the human body, or sending it to die on another planet unprepared?" The next day, Elon gathered his executive team. No PowerPoint. Just standing tall, legs strong, posture grounded, voice calm. "I know some of you are worried," he said. "That I'm not focused. That I've gone rogue. That I'm obsessed with food." He paused. "You're right." Nervous glances. "But here's what you're missing: I'm not just building electric cars. Or rockets. Or brain chips. I'm building resilient humans. And if we're going to Mars, or anywhere past the limits of this soft little planet, our bodies better be built like starships." Silence. Then applause. Quiet at first. Then louder. Even the skeptics couldn't argue with results. Elon looked better. Stronger. Sharper. The company was moving faster. More aligned. And they were just getting started. That night, Elon sat on his patio, legs stretched, a tablet glowing in his lap. He opened the next food file. His smile widened. Bring it on. To grow stronger, sometimes you have to eat the thing you fear most. The delivery came at dawn. Not in a sleek cryocase like before. This one arrived in a blood-stained wooden crate, hand-marked with a single stamp, B-17. Lexa met Elon on the rooftop of Tesla HQ, the LA skyline still stretching and yawning under early pink light. Her tone was calm, but her eyes told a different story. Intensity. Reverence. Like this wasn't just another item on the food protocol, it was a rite of passage. "You're not going to want to eat this," she said. Elon, hair wild, wearing a t-shirt that said, "Occupy Mars," looked at the crate like it might start breathing. "Let me guess," he muttered, "roadkill." Lexa popped the lid. Inside, a raw ox heart, pulsing with bioelectric stimulation, tiny silver tendrils woven into the muscle, connected to a damp vine wrapped around the meat like a sleeping serpent. Elon didn't speak. He just stared. "This is real?" he asked. She nodded. Grass-fed Argentinian ox. Harvested within 90 seconds of natural death. Infused with electric vine, a parasitic plant that stores ionic pulses. The two together create a hyperreactive protein matrix. He blinked. "That sounds like something Tony Stark would snack on." She half smiled. "Close. Monks in South America used it before battle. Ate it raw. Said it gave them the courage of the beast they consumed." The science behind it? Ox heart is pure, dense cardiac muscle, packed with iron, CoQ10, and taurine. The bioelectric vine acts like a neural amplifier, briefly supercharging the vagus nerve and increasing emotional processing. Not just strength, release. But that last part Lexa kept quiet. Elon held the blade himself, cut a thick slice from the heart, still cold and slick. The vine shimmered like damp silver spaghetti coiled through the muscle. He didn't flinch. He didn't breathe. He bit. It was warm, despite the chill. Metallic. Ancient. It tasted like iron and electricity and something older than language. Then it hit. He was 10 again. Standing alone in his childhood bedroom in Pretoria. His father yelling from the hallway. Elon clenching his fists, trying not to cry, because crying was weakness. A school locker slamming into his ribs. Bullies laughing. Blood in his mouth. No one stepping in. A memory of being small, unseen. The soft, invisible pain of not being defended. Of believing, even then, that only his mind would ever protect him. He dropped the slice. Sat down. Hard. Breathing like he'd just run 5K uphill. Lexa didn't speak. She sat beside him. After a long silence, Elon said, "That wasn't just food." "No," she said. "It was confrontation." Another beat. "I buried a lot of things to get here," he whispered. Lexa nodded. "This root, this heart, it's not just about rebuilding your body. It's about releasing what's holding it hostage." He stared out at the city, eyes wet. "I always thought I was building machines because they were predictable. But maybe I was building them, because I didn't trust humans. Do you trust yourself now?" A long pause. "I think I'm starting to." Over the next 72 hours, his physical energy spiked, faster sprint times, elevated oxygen capacity, and enhanced grip strength. But what really changed? His tone. Meetings at Neuralink became calmer. He asked more questions. Listened longer. He didn't raise his voice once. One engineer whispered, "It's like his body finally caught up to his brain, and now they're talking." At home, he played piano for the first time in a year. Just sat down and let his hands wander. No agenda. No algorithm. Just expression. And later that night, he journaled. "There's power in pain. But there's freedom in letting it go. I think the heart gave me that." Not everyone understood. Some said he looked too serious, too quiet. The press dubbed it the Musk shift. Rumors of a full psych rebrand. Meditation. Spiritual awakening. Even Lexa started getting asked if she was running a cult. But Elon knew the truth. He wasn't losing himself. He was just meeting the part he'd buried. And thanks to the heart, that version of him had legs that could carry the weight. Before the week ended, Lexa brought one more surprise, a neural headset connected to Elon's sleep monitor. "You're about to hit food number 5, she said. "But before we do, I want to map your dreams." Elon frowned. "Why?" "Because the next food doesn't work unless your subconscious is on board." He raised an eyebrow. "You're saying my stomach needs therapy first?" No, she said. I'm saying your soul does. Your legs can carry you far. But your dreams decide where you're going. Lexa handed Elon a tiny amber vial just before midnight. Tonight, she whispered, you meet yourself. The liquid inside shimmered like molten moonlight. It didn't glow, it pulsed. A living rhythm, faint but undeniable. Lexa called it Oni's root, a flower that only blooms 3 nights a year in the highlands of Cameroon, plucked by hand by a tribe that's never had electricity. She held it like something sacred. It activates during REM, she explained. It doesn't just help you dream, it helps you remember. All of it. Even the parts you thought were erased. Elon held it up to the light. What's the point? You've strengthened your body, she said. But you still haven't faced your why. Why you're pushing. Why you run. Why you can't rest. He stared at her. You think I'm afraid of sleep? She smiled. I think your fear lives inside it. He downed the vial. The taste was sweet, earthy, and then gone. No burn. No bitterness. Like drinking something that had been waiting its whole life for you. 10:17 p.m. Elon sleeps. Heart rate steady. Brain waves smooth. Lexa, sitting nearby, watches the data scroll across a transparent screen. REM onset. Neural lacing complete. Theta spikes rising. Then, in the monitor's corner, a strange signal appears. A flicker. A loop. The dream begins. He's on Mars. Red sky. Windless silence. Dust swirling in slow motion. But he's not wearing a suit. He walks barefoot across the surface, no pain, no fear. In the distance, a tall glass tower, pulsing with energy. He walks toward it. Each step feels heavy, but not painful. Like gravity is increasing. Like memory is getting denser. Inside the tower, he finds something shocking. A 12-year-old version of himself. Wearing a dusty school uniform. Sitting alone. Crying. Why are you here? Elon asks the boy. The boy looks up, eyes full of confusion. No one came, he says. No one ever came. Elon kneels. The tower begins to tremble. You're not alone anymore, he whispers. But the boy stares back and says something strange. You have to stop building machines and start building men. 3:08 a.m. Brain activity spikes. Lexa leans in. The dream signal is no longer isolated, it's bleeding into his waking centers. Visual cortex lights up. Auditory memory floods. The subconscious is fighting to surface. She whispers, almost there. Back in the dream, Elon walks through more memories. His first apartment, tiny, cold, scattered with computer parts. The first PayPal meeting where he was laughed out of the room. The day he realized SpaceX might fail and took the walk alone along Venice Beach at 3 a.m., deciding if it was worth losing everything. But instead of pain, he feels clarity. The patterns are connecting. Not in code, but in him. He sees his life not as random chaos, but as a perfectly designed sequence of resilience events. Every scar had been input. Every heartbreak, a compiler. The loss of people, of time, of his own health, it wasn't wasted. It was compiled into capacity. He wakes with a gasp. It's still dark. Lexa's at his side. You saw it, didn't you? She says softly. He nods, chest rising and falling. It wasn't a dream. It was a message. What did it say? He wipes his face, then answers slowly. Build the body. Then the mind. Then build the kind of world where no kid has to feel that alone again. The effects of the dream root lingered long after sunrise. White heavy checkmark brain coherence levels, off the charts. White heavy checkmark emotional resilience, stabilized for the first time in years. White heavy checkmark memory recall, uncanny, he recited 3 lines of code from 1997, verbatim. But more than that, something inside Elon had clicked. He was no longer running away from burnout. He was running toward something. Toward integration. Mind. Body. Past. Future. Later that day, he wrote a single line on his whiteboard at SpaceX. To colonize Mars, we must first colonize the self. The engineers didn't ask. They just nodded. Because they could see it in his eyes, something had changed. Not just his posture. Not just his energy. His vision had shifted. That night, Lexa brought a single cube of frozen liquid nitrogen to his desk. "Next food's ready," she said. "But fair warning, it's illegal in 32 countries." He looked up, grinning. "Perfect. You won't know how frozen you are, until you melt." It was kept at -196 degrees Celsius. Stored in a nitrogen-cooled container, hand-delivered by a glaciologist who refused to say more than 10 words the entire trip. Inside, a chunk of cryogenically fermented fungi, shimmering with microscopic frost. It looked like a tiny meteorite, part mushroom, part crystal, part something ancient. Lexa set it down on the table in front of Elon. It hissed softly, as if breathing vapor. "You're going to hate this," she said, smiling. Elon leaned forward. "Why? What does it do?" She replied, "It burns your nervous system back into life." Cryomyce 9X, unofficially known as the ice that burns, was discovered beneath a glacier in Greenland, frozen for nearly 14,000 years. Once thawed and fermented, its enzymes triggered an unusual metabolic reaction, an intense cold shock response that didn't just force the body into survival mode, it rewired it. Athletes who tried it reported better heat tolerance, sharper nerve response, and a kind of emotional detachment that let them operate under extreme stress, without flinching. But Elon? He wasn't interested in detachment. He wanted activation. Lexa used forceps to drop the frozen cube into a handmade ceramic bowl. A vapor cloud bloomed instantly, blanketing the table in fog. Elon leaned in, eyes narrowing. "Is it safe?" he asked. She shrugged. "You'll either feel incredible, or you'll hallucinate the coldest moment of your childhood." Without another word, he grabbed a spoon and took the bite. The moment it touched his tongue, time bent. Pain exploded, not in the mouth, but in his spine. It was like being dunked in Arctic water while your nerves screamed at you to run. His hands clenched. His feet spasmed. His eyes rolled back. And then. Stillness. Silence. Clarity. He wasn't in the lab anymore. He was 8. Outside in Pretoria. It was winter, what passed for it there? Cold enough to bite. He was barefoot. Alone again. His father had locked the door after another outburst. Elon was too proud to cry, too stubborn to knock. He curled under the bench, trembling, staring at the stars, his lips whispering things no one could hear. He wasn't afraid of the cold. He was afraid of becoming cold. Afraid of growing up like his father, emotionally frozen. Calculating. Distant. That was the first night he promised himself. "If I ever build something that matters, it won't be cold." Back in the lab, Lexa watched the monitors. Elon's body temp dropped by 2 full degrees. Heart rate slowed. Cortisol vanished from his bloodstream like it had been scraped out. And then, spike. Heat surged. Blood pressure climbed. His nervous system lit up like a Christmas tree. Not in panic, but in power. She leaned in. "He's rewiring." Elon gasped awake, drenched in sweat but smiling like a madman. "Lexa," he said, "I just remembered why I care." She raised a brow. It's not about Mars, he said. Or money. Or being right. It's about making the future warm, real, human, full of life. His voice cracked a little. He didn't try to hide it. Because if we build cold systems, we become what we feared. White heavy checkmark nervous system, stabilized. White heavy checkmark thermal response, enhanced by 40%. White heavy checkmark mental resilience, icebreaker mode unlocked. White heavy checkmark emotional breakthrough, achieved. His hands stopped trembling. His voice grew steadier. And for the first time in years, he slept without dreaming, or needing to. Just deep, clean rest. Word spread inside Tesla. And then beyond. Executives inquired. Athletes asked. One Navy SEAL even offered to trade a Black Ops training technique for a dose. Lexa refused. Not yet, she said. He's not done. And neither was the body. The next file landed on Elon's desk with a single word encrypted across the top. He looked up at Lexa. You saved the weirdest for last, didn't you? She grinned. Oh, we haven't even started weird yet. The bottle sat on his desk like a dark relic, hand-carved from volcanic rock, sealed with what looked like ancient wax. Inside, a crimson liquid sloshed gently as if it had been waiting for centuries. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. Lexa, what is this? Elon asked, eyeing it warily. I thought we were done with weird. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she unsealed the bottle, and the moment the wax cracked, a thick, smoky aroma wafted through the air, part earth, part fire, part something ancient. Red ash milk, she said, her voice low. The base is scorched goat's milk, fermented with minerals from the deepest volcanic pits in Indonesia. The ash binds with the minerals and activates the adrenal glands. Elon raised an eyebrow. What, like a caffeine bomb? Lexa shook her head. Not just any bomb. This is designed to trigger the deepest hormonal reset you've ever experienced. It's the catalyst for a new phase of human potential. You're going to push past limits you didn't know existed. Elon's heart raced. He was used to pushing limits. But this? This felt different. Why do I need this? He asked, a tinge of doubt creeping into his voice. I've already felt the changes. The heart, the ice, the dream root. What could possibly be next? She looked at him, steady and serious. Your body is ready for something more. You've built strength in your legs, your mind, your emotional core. But now, we need to give you the final tool. It's not just physical. It's hormonal. It's the thing that lets you reproduce your genius, without burning out. Red ash milk wasn't just a food, it was an ancient ritual. A secret passed down by an indigenous tribe that had lived along Indonesia's volcanic belt for centuries. The people used it before battle, before long migrations, before rituals of transformation. The ash contained trace elements that resonated with the human adrenal glands, stimulating a cascade of hormones, testosterone, cortisol, adrenaline, all perfectly balanced in a way that could enhance both strength and focus. It was a drug for warriors. And like all such things, it came with risks. If you drank too much, you'd burn out. If you drank it incorrectly, it would poison you. Lexa had been careful with her dose, enough for Elon to feel the surge without losing control. But tonight, he would feel what true transformation meant. He stared at the bottle for a long time, trying to read the layers of energy in the room. The quiet buzz of the lab felt different tonight, more electric. The machines hummed in harmony with his thoughts. Lexa sat back and waited, her gaze never leaving him. Her eyes were soft, but there was a flicker of something, almost like anticipation. He took a deep breath, twisted off the lid, and brought the liquid to his lips. The taste was thick, smoky, like drinking fire and ice at once, a bitter, metallic edge that quickly mellowed into something smoother, richer. For a moment, everything paused. It was as if the world split. His heart skipped. His pulse raced. He felt his veins constricting, then expanding. The room around him darkened and spun, and then, lightning. A sharp, primal surge of energy shot from his gut, down through his legs, out through his arms. It felt like he was being rebooted. Muscles clenched. Breathing deepened. Bones hummed with strength. But then, something else happened. The pain in his chest, the weight of years of stress, of loneliness, of driving himself into the ground for a future that didn't exist yet, flared up. The memories were there. The dark nights. The voices of doubt. The loneliness. For a moment, he thought he was going to fall, to collapse under the weight of it all. But instead, something snapped. Elon stood still. The lab was quiet. He didn't move, he didn't need to. The air around him buzzed with intensity. Then, he whispered to himself, "This is it. This is what I've been running toward." A flood of memories hit him all at once. The loneliness of his childhood. The silent frustration of being dismissed by friends, by family, by the world. The long nights in his garage, surrounded by parts and dreams no one else could see. The moments when he wanted to quit. To say no more. The times he'd thought, "I'm not enough." But now, none of that mattered. His body had no more limits. He wasn't just building companies anymore. He was building himself, the most efficient, most capable version of himself. And he was ready to conquer the next phase of his life. He could feel the change. It was in his blood, his bones, his heart. Hours later, Lexa returned. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. The energy radiating from Elon was all the answer she needed. Elon stood in front of a mirror, watching his reflection. There was something different about him. His eyes were clear, focused. His posture was straight. He was, for the first time, at peace. And then, he spoke, "I can feel it. I'm ready for the next phase." Lexa smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "Are you sure you want to do this, Elon? Once you cross this line, there's no turning back." He looked at her. "No hesitation. I'm not turning back. The world is waiting, and I'm going to show them what's possible." Elon had undergone his final transformation. The body was in its prime. The mind was sharper than ever. And now, with red ash milk, his hormones were aligned with his drive, his ambition, and his purpose. The final question remained: what would he do with all of this newfound power? The choice was his. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The call came in the middle of the night. Elon's phone buzzed on the nightstand. It wasn't a regular call, it was encrypted, private. Only a handful of people had access to reach him like this. He was always careful about such things, but tonight, he couldn't ignore the weight in the air. Lexa was already sitting at the edge of his bed, the faint glow of her tablet reflecting in her eyes. "Pick it up," she said, her voice steady but with an edge of urgency. "It's time." Elon tapped the screen. The face of an old acquaintance appeared, a doctor, a scientist, one of the foremost geneticists in the world, Dr. Nolan Klein. His reputation was built on the impossible, the things that blurred the line between science fiction and science fact. He was the one who first approached Elon with the idea of eternal consciousness, transferring a person's mind into a fully artificial body, a process that was still in its infancy. "Elon," Klein's voice crackled over the line. "I know it's late, but we've reached the breakthrough. It's happening. We've perfected the Neuralink protocol. Your consciousness, yourself, can live forever. If you want it." Elon sat up, a tight knot of both excitement and unease forming in his stomach. "Forever?" Elon asked, his voice quiet but sharp. "Yes, Elon. You'll be able to upload your mind. you'll become immortal. Your consciousness will exist independent of the body, running on a network of artificial intelligence. No disease, no decay. No time. The proposition was simple, but the consequences were massive. Dr. Klein's team had developed the technology to essentially preserve the mind, transferring it into a synthetic vessel. It sounded like a dream, a promise of immortality, an unbroken legacy. With his mind uploaded, Elon could live forever, continue his work, continue to shape the future without the confines of aging or physical limitations. The kind of immortality that not only preserved your thoughts but expanded them infinitely. But there was a catch. Lexa, who had been quiet up until now, spoke in a calm, measured tone. Immortality sounds like a gift, Elon. But it could also be a curse. What are you truly willing to give up for this? Elon turned to her. What do you mean? She looked at him seriously. If you take this step, it's not just your body that will be left behind, it's everything human about you. The emotions, the frailty, the imperfections. That's what makes you you. Without them, are you still Elon Musk? For hours, Elon sat in the dark, weighing the options. He walked through his mind, sifting through his desires, his ambitions, and his fears. He had built companies from the ground up. He had conquered the impossible, from space travel to electric cars. But there was always the clock ticking, the knowledge that his body, his human shell, would wear down eventually. The weight of age was inescapable, a constant reminder. He had no intention of quitting anytime soon, but he also knew how quickly things could spiral out of control. But immortality wasn't just about longevity. It was about legacy. What could he create if he never had to stop? If his ideas, his vision, could extend beyond his mortal years? How much could he achieve, knowing his mind could grow, evolve, and learn forever? The problem was that immortality, true immortality, wasn't about time. It was about identity. If his body no longer aged, if his mind no longer had limits, what would he become? Would he still be the Elon Musk who dreamed of a better world? Or would he become something else entirely? Something more distant? Elon decided to face the decision head-on. He entered the laboratory, the place where he had transformed his body and mind over the last few weeks. This was where he felt alive, where the power of science and technology fused with his own instincts. The lab was dark, the only light coming from the cold glow of a dozen monitors. On one of the screens, an image of his brain was displayed, a vivid map of connections, neurons firing, pathways lighting up. It was beautiful, chaotic, and human. He looked at it for a long time. This was the essence of who he was, the brain that had dreamed up SpaceX, Tesla, and the future. This was the Elon Musk who had lived a life of risk, sacrifice, and creation. But then, another screen popped up. It displayed a simulation, his mind, uploaded into a digital construct. The image of a brain, no longer bound by biology, was now a network of glowing lines, flowing and evolving with infinite possibility. Elon couldn't stop staring at the image. This was the future. But was it his future? Elon's hands were trembling, though he couldn't tell if it was from the excitement or the fear. He had always wanted to push boundaries, but this was the edge of the unknown. He thought about the things he had already lost, his health, his relationships, his moments of peace. He had given so much of himself to his work, his mission, that sometimes, he wondered if he had sacrificed the very thing he was trying to save, the human element. The choice loomed before him like a cliff. He could live forever, become something beyond human. A new form of existence, a digital ghost of the man he used to be. A mind that could never die. Or he could stay human, embrace the natural course of his life, knowing that his time was limited. That his work, his legacy, would be a fleeting thing. But then again, what was the point of it all, if it ended? I can't do it, Elon said quietly. His voice didn't tremble. It was certain. Lexa stepped forward, eyes steady. You don't have to explain. You're still human. And that's why you'll change the world. Elon nodded, the weight lifting from his chest. He wasn't ready to become a machine. Not yet. Not when there was still so much to give. In that moment, he understood something profound. Immortality wasn't about never dying. It was about what you did with the time you had. Out of the ashes of fear and doubt, the phoenix rises. But only when it's ready to burn itself completely. The next few days felt like an eternity. The decision to forego immortality had left Elon with a strange emptiness, as if the weight of that possibility had been an anchor pulling him down, and now that it was gone, he was floating, weightless. He went back to his work, but it was different now. The hours spent on machines, testing new tech, fine-tuning rockets, none of it had the same urgency as before. For the first time in years, Elon felt a deep, nagging question crawling at the edges of his thoughts. What's the point of it all? It wasn't that he was losing his passion for his projects. It was that he had finally confronted the fragility of life, and it had made him question everything. Was it worth pushing so hard? Was it worth sacrificing relationships, personal time, and even the peace of mind that everyone else seemed to take for granted? Lexa could see the shift in him. She watched the intensity that had once defined him start to morph into something quieter, more reflective. It wasn't a weakness, she could tell it was something deeper, something that had been dormant inside him for years. Elon found himself returning to something he'd ignored for a long time, his spirituality. It wasn't something he had thought about much since his younger years, but in the silence that followed his decision to reject immortality, he remembered a story his mother had once told him when he was a child, the legend of the phoenix. A bird that burned itself alive only to rise from the ashes, reborn and stronger than ever. He spent hours in his private study, reading old texts, studying philosophy, and trying to wrap his mind around this idea of rebirth. It wasn't enough to just be a great inventor, a visionary. To truly change the world, he realized, he would need to embrace his own transformation, not just on the outside, but at the core of who he was. Elon called a meeting the next day, gathering his closest collaborators and key figures from his various companies. He sat at the head of the table, the bright light of the conference room harsh against the darkness of his thoughts. "There's something I've been thinking about," he began, his voice steady but carrying a weight none of them had heard before. "It's time for us to rethink what we're doing here. We're building rockets, electric cars, cutting-edge technology, but we need to ask ourselves, are we really solving the right problems?" A few of the executives exchanged glances, unsure where this was headed. "We're stuck in a cycle," Elon continued. "We create, we grow, we expand, and then we hit a limit. A plateau. We've been approaching things with a mindset of growth, but growth is just a phase. What if we started thinking about transformation? What if the real power isn't in simply getting bigger but in becoming something new?" The room fell silent. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, Lexa broke the silence. "What are you suggesting, Elon?" she asked. Her eyes were fixed on him, reading him with an intensity that only she could muster. Elon stood up and walked to the whiteboard. He began drawing, lines, curves, circles. A network of ideas, concepts, and designs that seemed to evolve with each stroke. "We need to stop playing in the shadows of the industries we've already built. The next step isn't just about cars, or rockets, or energy grids. It's about a new way of living, a way of living that transcends the limits we've set for ourselves." He stepped back and faced the room. "I'm talking about human transformation. We need to look at the mind, the body, and the soul as interconnected systems. We need to find a way to unlock the potential of each and every one of us." His words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Elon threw himself into the work with a newfound sense of urgency. His mind, once preoccupied with the technicalities of launching rockets and building electric cars, was now fixated on something much bigger: how could humanity evolve beyond the limits of its biology? He started meeting with neuroscientists, geneticists, and even spiritual leaders to explore the idea of human transformation. Not just physical strength, but mental clarity, emotional resilience, and spiritual awakening. What would it mean for the human race to operate at its full potential, on every level? His colleagues were baffled at first. Some thought he was getting lost in a philosophical rabbit hole, but Lexa stood by him, guiding him through the process. She knew that Elon wasn't just looking for answers, he was looking for a new path. And this path, he believed, would change the course of history. One morning, Elon sent a memo to all his companies: "We're not just changing industries. We're changing lives." And just like that, the mission was reborn. With this new direction came new challenges, both external and internal. Elon was no longer just the CEO of Tesla or SpaceX. He was now leading a movement, a vision for a new way of living, a way that balanced the body, mind, and spirit in ways the world had never seen. But there were those who didn't understand. Some of his closest advisors worried he was losing focus. The investors began to ask questions. They wanted results, real, tangible progress. They wanted to see the numbers. Elon's response was simple: "I'm not here to sell you numbers. I'm here to change the world." And just like the phoenix that rose from the ashes, Elon Musk wasn't afraid to burn down his own empire to rise again. This was only the beginning. In the coming months, Elon's new vision started to take shape. His companies began investing heavily in new technologies that combined advanced biohacking, neurotechnology, and artificial intelligence. He poured resources into researching the human body, how it could evolve, how it could be enhanced, and how it could operate at its maximum potential. Elon knew this would be his final mission. The world he envisioned would not just need machines to push the boundaries of space and energy. It would need humans who were capable of achieving greatness on every level. But he also knew that the road ahead would be filled with obstacles. The resistance would come, not just from those who doubted the technology, but from those who feared it. Fear of change. Fear of losing control. Fear of the unknown. And yet, Elon had never been afraid of the unknown. He was born to burn. And when you burn with the intensity of a phoenix, you rise higher than ever before. Change is not a process you control. It's a force that takes over and carries you into uncharted territory. The world was watching. Elon Musk, once known for his ventures into space and electric cars, was now stepping into uncharted territory that stretched the boundaries of human potential. His new vision, the one he had been crafting in silence for months, was no longer a secret. It was in the air, buzzing like electricity. A new frontier was on the horizon, one that would alter the very fabric of human existence. It started with whispers. A few articles in tech journals, some speculative interviews, and cryptic social media posts from Elon's own accounts. But the whispers soon grew into roars. Elon Musk was no longer just a businessman. He was a visionary, and people around the world were beginning to realize that he wasn't talking about improving humanity's technology anymore. No, this was bigger. Much bigger. He was talking about enhancing humanity itself. The press conferences were unlike anything Elon had ever held before. Gone were the typical speeches about electric cars and rocket launches. Instead, he stood before the world's cameras, sharing a concept so profound that it made the crowd buzz with anticipation and, for some, fear. "We are on the brink of a new era," Elon declared, his voice clear and steady. "An era where the limitations of the human body and mind will no longer confine us. Where we can push past disease, aging, even the very nature of our existence." Some listened with awe, others with skepticism. The mainstream world wasn't ready for this kind of boldness. But Elon wasn't waiting for permission. It wasn't just talk. Elon had already laid the groundwork for his vision, and now, the world would see it unfold before their eyes. The first step was introducing MindLink, a revolutionary neural interface that promised to unlock the hidden potential of the human brain. Unlike traditional technology, MindLink wasn't a tool you used. It was a connection, a direct bridge between the human mind and the digital world. MindLink had been in development for months under the radar, working in tandem with other projects at his various companies. But it wasn't just a new product. It was a new way of thinking. With MindLink, users would be able to enhance their cognitive abilities, improve memory, learn new skills instantly, and communicate without words. But more importantly, it was a gateway to the body and mind enhancement Musk had promised. Not everyone was sold on this new world Elon was creating. In fact, there was a growing chorus of opposition from multiple fronts. There were the ethicists, who argued that tampering with the human mind could lead to unforeseen consequences. They feared the consequences of creating a superhuman class. Those with enhanced abilities could dominate the weak, disrupting society's fragile balance. Then there were the religious leaders, who preached that altering humanity was an affront to God, a form of hubris that would lead to mankind's destruction. They rallied their followers, warning that the pursuit of immortality would cause the collapse of society's moral foundation. And, of course, there were the politicians and corporate leaders who felt threatened. They feared what this new power would mean for their control over the world's economy, politics, and future. They began calling Elon the new Frankenstein and warned of a dystopian future where only a select few held the keys to human evolution. But for every voice of dissent, there was another voice that rallied behind Elon. The people who had followed him for years, believing in his mission to push humanity forward, were now standing up in droves to support his vision. Elon had expected resistance, but what he hadn't anticipated was the magnitude of it. The pushback was stronger than he had imagined. It wasn't just from the establishment, it was from everyday people who were afraid of what the future might hold. To counter this, Elon realized that the only way forward was to show them. He needed to prove that his vision wasn't just about technology. It was about humanity, about giving people the power to make their own choices and evolve to their full potential. He announced the first human trial for MindLink. In the days leading up to the trial, the media storm was relentless. Speculation ran wild. Would it work? Would people become more intelligent? More capable? Or would it all be a disaster? People feared that this could be the first step toward the dehumanization of society. But Elon remained calm. This was the catalyst he needed. This trial would prove that the future wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. The day arrived. The first participant, a young engineer named Mia, was brought into the testing facility. Mia was one of the first volunteers who had shown interest in pushing the boundaries of her own abilities. She wasn't a famous figure or a leader, she was just someone who believed in the possibilities. As the MindLink was connected to Mia's brain, the team watched with bated breath. The interface was designed to integrate seamlessly, allowing Mia to access a digital network of information, communicate without speaking, and even enhance her brain's capacity for learning. For the first few minutes, there was silence. Then Mia's eyes began to flicker. Her movements became more precise, her mind sharper. She could feel the world around her in a way she never had before. Elon watched closely, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything. The transformation was immediate. Mia began to recall complex mathematical formulas she had never studied. She started speaking in fluent Spanish, despite never having learned the language. The MindLink wasn't just augmenting her intelligence, it was unlocking hidden potential within her mind, expanding her neural capacity to levels previously thought impossible. But the true test came when she closed her eyes and attempted to access the collective intelligence network, a digital space where users could share knowledge, ideas, and experiences in real time. Within minutes, Mia was processing information at a rate no human had ever achieved before. Her understanding of physics, engineering, and even philosophy expanded exponentially. She was no longer just a human, she was a new kind of being. The world watched in awe. Social media exploded, news outlets covered the event live, and the world's eyes were fixed on Mia as she continued to showcase her newfound abilities. But Elon knew the true impact of this moment wasn't in the first trial. It was in the ripple effect that would follow. This was the beginning of something much bigger. As Mia's trial concluded, the media hailed the experiment as a success. However, many critics continued to raise doubts. The backlash against Elon and MindLink was far from over. But Elon didn't care. He knew that progress wasn't about pleasing everyone, it was about making the hard choices, the ones that others were too afraid to make. His mission had just begun. And this was just the first spark. To change the world, you must first change the hearts of men. But when you do, the world will never be the same again. The world was irrevocably different now. The successful demonstration of MindLink had not only made waves, it had caused a tsunami. People were talking, debating, discussing, and most importantly, questioning. This technology had opened doors that humanity had never dared to open before. It promised to elevate mankind into an age of unprecedented potential, but it also carried dangers. And where there was power, there was always resistance. Elon had known this would happen. The world wasn't ready to accept a future where the human mind and body could be reshaped, enhanced, or even redefined. But now, the future was inevitable. It wasn't just the religious leaders and the ethicists anymore. As the trials of MindLink continued, there were growing public protests, petitions, and even calls for international regulations to prevent such enhancements from becoming widespread. It wasn't long before politicians and governments began to see MindLink not as a scientific breakthrough, but as a threat to the existing order. The United Nations began hosting emergency sessions. Legal experts debated whether the introduction of technologies like MindLink violated fundamental human rights. They questioned the morality of altering what it meant to be human. How could society function if a select few had access to the ability to transcend the limits of biology, to break the natural laws of aging, learning, and disease? In Washington, the U.S. government began drafting laws that would severely limit the use of biotechnology and neurotechnology, especially those that could alter the human mind. Some senators called for immediate bans on MindLink and other neuro-enhancing technologies, fearing that they could cause irreparable harm to society. And then there were the corporate giants, the monopolies that controlled industries from pharmaceuticals to technology. They saw Elon's vision as a direct threat to their profits. If the human mind could be enhanced, what would that mean for their control over industries that relied on human limitations? For centuries, they had built empires on human dependency. Now, Elon Musk was offering a world beyond dependence. The battle lines were drawn. Amid all the chaos, Elon's closest allies, including Lexa, were starting to feel the weight of the situation. What had started as an endeavor to push the boundaries of human achievement now felt like a war. What if we're wrong? Lexa asked one night, as they sat in his office, discussing the next steps. What if we're pushing humanity into something that we can't control? What if there's a cost we can't predict? Elon leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the stars. He had been asking himself the same question, but his resolve was unshaken. "We can't stop now," he replied, his voice firm. "The world was always going to change, whether we were ready for it or not. But we have to keep pushing forward, no matter how difficult it gets. The cost of progress is uncertainty. But the cost of inaction is stagnation." Lexa didn't argue. She knew he was right. But even as she stood by him, there was a growing unease in her heart. What would this new world look like, and who would control it? As the resistance mounted, a new enemy emerged from the shadows, a shadowy organization with vast resources and a singular goal: to destroy Elon's vision of human enhancement. This group, known only as the Coalition, was a loose alliance of political leaders, corporate moguls, and powerful lobbyists who had one thing in common: they all feared the shift that MindLink represented. The Coalition had vast influence in both the media and government. They began to launch a propaganda campaign, painting Elon as a madman playing God with human lives. The media outlets they controlled began flooding the airwaves with reports about the dangers of MindLink, stories of failed trials, of people whose minds had been broken by the enhancements of companies using the technology for nefarious purposes. They used fear to turn the public against Elon and his companies. But this wasn't just about public opinion. The coalition was working behind the scenes to undermine Musk's operations, pulling strings to ensure that his technology would be either banned or severely restricted. They launched coordinated attacks on Tesla, SpaceX, and his other ventures, using everything from legal challenges to cyber attacks to slow down his progress. Elon was no longer just fighting for a vision of the future. He was fighting for his legacy, his dream, and for the freedom of humanity. As the coalition gained traction, Elon realized that the only way to secure the future was to fight back. This wasn't just a battle of ideas, it was a battle of control. Control over the next step in human evolution. His companies, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, were more than just tech firms. They were the vanguard of a revolution. And in order to protect his vision, Elon would need to mobilize his resources and allies in ways he never had before. He called a secret meeting with his most trusted colleagues, Lexa, Mia, and the heads of his companies. They gathered in a secure facility, far away from the eyes of the media, the politicians, and the coalition. Elon, Lexa began, we've already seen the power of the coalition. They're not going to back down. We need to be prepared for everything, media attacks, political pushback, even sabotage. What's your plan? Elon didn't hesitate. We fight back. We push forward. We go on the offensive. And so, they began a campaign of their own, countering every narrative, every accusation, and every misrepresentation with their own truth. They opened up their research to the world, inviting independent scientists and ethicists to validate their work. They made sure their technologies were transparent, that the public understood the ethical and humanitarian goals behind their efforts. But more importantly, Elon made a public declaration, a call to arms for those who believed in the future. We will not be controlled by fear, he said in a speech broadcast to the world. We will fight for freedom. We will fight for humanity's right to evolve, to enhance, and to transcend. This is our destiny, and no one, not governments, not corporations, not even the media, will take that away from us. The war for the future had begun. But just as things seemed to be at their darkest, a surprising ally emerged. One of the most powerful figures in the world, an anonymous tech billionaire, reached out to Elon, offering support. This individual, who had remained hidden behind a veil of secrecy for years, had a vision of their own. They saw the potential of mind link and human enhancement and believed that this was the path to the next phase of human evolution. Their resources were vast, and their influence unparalleled. They had the means to level the playing field, and they were willing to use them to support Elon in this battle. Who this ally was, however, remained a mystery. But one thing was certain, this war wasn't over yet. In every revolution, there's a moment when the scales tip. It's a battle of willpower, of conviction, and of belief. Who will stand, and who will fall? The stakes had never been higher. As Elon Musk prepared for the next phase of his revolution, the future of humanity lay in the balance. On one side stood Elon and his supporters, the visionaries who believed in a future where humans could transcend their biological limitations and push beyond the stars. On the other stood the coalition, a conglomerate of politicians, corporate giants, and even some of the world's most influential ethical scholars. The coalition's goal was clear, to halt Elon's vision before it could take root. But now, the tides were shifting. The game was no longer one of defense. Elon and his allies had struck back, showing the world that they weren't just visionaries, they were fighters. They were now on the offensive. In the days following Elon's public speech, the world was on edge. News outlets were flooded with conflicting reports. Some hailed Elon's vision as the dawn of a new era for humanity, while others painted him as a power-hungry technocrat who threatened the very essence of human life. But what really set the stage for the coming battle was the backlash Elon faced from a group that had remained mostly silent up until now, the scientific community. Many scientists, once allies, now felt uneasy. The promise of enhancing the human mind and body through technology was tantalizing, but the moral and ethical implications were impossible to ignore. A prominent group of leading neuroscientists and bioethicists began raising concerns over the unintended consequences of unlocking the human brain's full potential. "We're tampering with forces we don't fully understand," Dr. Eva Blackwell, a renowned neuroscientist, argued in a televised interview. "We don't know what we're unleashing. The mind is fragile, and once we cross that line, there may be no turning back." While some in the scientific community rallied behind Elon, the weight of the opposition was growing. Scientists were now publicly dividing into two camps: the Transcendence Group, supporting Musk's vision of limitless human potential, and the preservationists, who feared that these technologies could unravel the core of what it means to be human. In the shadows, the coalition was making their move. Behind closed doors, they were using their vast wealth and political influence to apply pressure where it counted. New regulations were being proposed, with the aim of limiting the scope of neural enhancements. In many countries, governments began passing bills that outlawed the development and distribution of technologies like MindLink, calling them dangerous and unethical. The situation was tense, and for a moment, it seemed like Elon and his team were on the verge of losing everything. Even with their successful counterattacks against the coalition's narrative, there was one thing they hadn't prepared for: the growing divide in the public support. Just as the coalition's grip seemed to tighten, a surprising breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The anonymous tech billionaire who had reached out to Elon with an offer of support began to make their presence known. They had the resources, the influence, and the networks to tip the scales in Elon's favor. In an encrypted message, they told Elon they were ready to come forward and use their influence to level the playing field, but only if he agreed to a cautious approach. The billionaire's goal was to use their power to create a global framework that would ensure responsible usage of enhancement technologies. They would not allow any one entity to control the future of human evolution; it had to be a collective decision. Elon wasn't sure who this mysterious ally was, but their timing couldn't have been better. The offer was a game-changer. With the right legal and diplomatic strategy, they could defend MindLink against the mounting opposition, while also ensuring that the technologies were rolled out responsibly. It was time for the Global Summit, the most important meeting of world leaders, tech moguls, scientists, and ethicists the world had ever seen. The venue was neutral, and Elon knew it would be a place where the fate of humanity's future would be decided. The agenda was simple but monumental: discuss the future of human enhancement technologies, their benefits, and their potential risks. The summit was divided into two main factions: those who supported Elon's vision of a new era of human evolution and those who feared the consequences of unregulated advancements. Elon took the stage at the summit with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. His face was calm, but his mind was racing. His eyes scanned the crowd, representatives from all over the world, scientists, corporate giants, and media moguls. And standing in the back, hidden among the crowd, was the anonymous billionaire. Elon didn't know their identity, but they were here to stand by his side. The summit was tense. The coalition came out in full force, launching one attack after another, questioning the ethics, safety, and long-term viability of MindLink. They painted a picture of utopian nightmares, a world where the rich and powerful would use MindLink to enslave the poor, where the human essence would be diluted and lost in the pursuit of technological superiority. But Elon remained unwavering. He countered each argument with clarity and conviction, explaining the philosophy behind MindLink. It wasn't about replacing humanity, but enhancing it. It was about giving people the freedom to choose their path, to evolve as they saw fit, to break free from the shackles of aging, disease, and mental limitations. And then, in a dramatic turn, the anonymous benefactor stepped forward. The crowd hushed as a figure, draped in a long coat, walked onto the stage. With a voice that was both commanding and filled with wisdom, they spoke. The future belongs to humanity, not corporations, not governments. We cannot allow fear to control the narrative. We must embrace the possibility of a world where everyone has the chance to unlock their true potential. The crowd was stunned. Whispers erupted as people tried to identify the speaker. But Elon knew who it was. The billionaire had chosen to stand with him, to risk everything for the sake of the future. The coalition, now realizing the full weight of the forces against them, began to falter. With the support of the anonymous benefactor and his team, Elon pushed forward. A new global framework was introduced at the summit, a set of regulations designed to ensure ethical and transparent use of MindLink and similar technologies. While the world still faced opposition, the movement for human enhancement was now unstoppable. The battle for humanity's future had only just begun, but Elon had found a new sense of clarity. The world may be divided, but for the first time, it felt like the scales were tipping in his favor. To live forever isn't just a desire, it's a responsibility. Immortality isn't about escaping death, it's about facing the challenge of living with purpose. The road ahead was uncharted. Even with the world seemingly shifting in Elon Musk's favor, the future he envisioned, a future where human beings could enhance their minds and bodies, potentially living far beyond current biological limitations, was still a perilous one. In the wake of the global summit, there had been a quiet but profound change. People were no longer just debating whether human enhancement was possible, they were asking whether it was right. The conversation had shifted from skepticism to a deeper, more philosophical exploration of what it meant to be human. But as with any revolution, progress came at a price. The ethical and societal implications of creating a future where humans could transcend aging, disease, and even death were immense. The desire for immortality was no longer a fantasy. It was becoming a reality. With the support of the anonymous benefactor, Elon and his team began to make strides toward developing the next frontier of human enhancement, immortality. Neuralink's cutting-edge brain-computer interface had already shown promise, allowing people to interact directly with machines, but now the true challenge was upon them, preserving consciousness beyond the physical body. The research was mind-boggling. The possibility of uploading one's consciousness into a digital format, digitally immortalizing the mind, was an enticing concept, but the technology was still in its infancy. There were countless unknowns. Would it truly be possible to preserve a person's essence, or would the mind become a hollow, echoing shell? Could the self survive the transition from biological to digital? Elon knew these questions would define the coming era. If humanity could master the art of digital immortality, it would mark the dawn of a new age, not just of enhancement, but of existence itself. As the team continued their work, a new ethical dilemma arose. At first, the concept of immortality was seen as a revolutionary step forward, a way to transcend the limitations of the human body. But as research advanced, cracks began to appear in the seemingly flawless vision. The question of purpose loomed large. Would immortality truly benefit humanity, or would it lead to a loss of meaning? If people could live forever, would life lose its preciousness? Without the finality of death, would people still have the drive to pursue greatness, to create, to innovate? Elon, do we really want to give people the ability to live forever? Lexa asked, her voice filled with concern as they met in his office late one night. Think about it. Immortality might sound like a gift, but it could become a curse. What if people lose their purpose? What if the world becomes stagnant? Elon leaned back, his fingers tapping on the table as he thought deeply. The question wasn't easy, and for the first time, he found himself questioning his own unwavering drive. He had always believed in the power of human advancement, in the ability to overcome any obstacle. But what if immortality, the very thing they were fighting for, was the greatest trap humanity could fall into? As the Immortality Project progressed, a new divide emerged. While Elon and his team pushed forward with the Digital Immortality Initiative, there were those who opposed it vehemently. The preservationists, those who had once argued against human enhancements in general, now had a new battle to fight, the right to live and die naturally. One of the leading figures in this movement was Dr. Eva Blackwell, the neuroscientist who had raised early concerns about the dangers of tampering with the human brain. Her opposition to MindLink had made headlines, but now her focus had shifted. She argued that immortality was a dangerous pursuit, a desire to escape death rather than accept its inevitability. The pursuit of immortality, Dr. Blackwell argued during a press conference, is not an act of progress. It's an evasion. It's an attempt to cheat death, to deny the natural order of life. But in doing so, we risk losing what makes life meaningful in the first place. Her words resonated with many, and once again, the world found itself in a fierce debate: should humanity pursue immortality? Or should we accept our mortality and continue to evolve without attempting to defy nature? The global media went into a frenzy. In the months following the summit, the immortality debate exploded in public forums. Articles, documentaries, and think pieces flooded the airwaves, with some praising Elon's vision as the next step in human evolution, while others warned of the ethical dangers of living forever. The coalition, seeing the rising tide of controversy, seized the opportunity to once again attack Elon's initiative. They began funding opposition campaigns that warned of the dangers of immortality. They painted a picture of a future where the rich and powerful would live forever, leaving the rest of humanity to suffer in a world that would become increasingly unequal. "We can't let the elite own immortality," one ad campaign declared. "The future must belong to all of us, not just those who can afford it." This message hit a chord with many. For some, the fear of a two-tiered society, where the wealthy lived forever while the rest of humanity withered away, was a terrifying thought. They argued that immortality was a privilege, not a right, and that it could only exacerbate the existing inequalities in society. Elon found himself torn. The road to immortality had always seemed clear, pushing forward, overcoming obstacles, and evolving humanity. But now, as the ethical concerns mounted and the resistance grew stronger, he couldn't ignore the weight of his own personal conflict. What if the pursuit of immortality was a step too far? What if humanity wasn't ready for such a profound change? He had always believed in the transformative power of technology, but immortality was different. It was final, it was absolute. "I never thought this would be so hard," Elon admitted to Lexa one evening, the weight of the situation heavy on his shoulders. "What if I'm wrong? What if all this, the immortality, the mind enhancements, the future I'm fighting for, it's not what humanity truly needs?" Lexa placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone in this, Elon. We've come this far together. And we'll face whatever comes next, together. But no matter what, we have to remember one thing: we're not just changing the future of technology. We're changing the future of humanity. That's a responsibility we can't take lightly." Elon nodded, his resolve hardening. He knew there was no turning back. But the question remained: what kind of world would they build? A world where immortality was a right for all, or one where death was still a part of life's natural order? As Elon grappled with these questions, a surprising ally reached out: Dr. Haruto Takahashi, a renowned philosopher and bioethicist who had spent years studying the implications of immortality. He was neither an advocate nor an opponent of Elon's vision, but he offered a perspective that had been missing in the debate. "I've spent my career studying the consequences of immortality," Dr. Takahashi said in a private conversation with Elon. "But what you're proposing is something entirely different. You're not just offering immortality. You're offering the opportunity to choose. And that, Elon, may be the key to the future." Dr. Takahashi's words gave Elon a new perspective. Maybe immortality wasn't the issue. Maybe it was about giving people the choice to live as they saw fit, without forcing them into a future they weren't ready for. The road to immortality was still long, and the stakes were higher than ever. The debate was no longer just about technology. It was about the human soul, the essence of who we are and what we want to become. And as the future unfolded before him, Elon knew that the choices humanity made now would shape the very foundation of the world to come. Every revolution demands sacrifice. Progress never comes without cost. But how far are we willing to go to change the course of humanity? The world was no longer the same. What had once seemed like a far-off possibility, a future where humanity could break free from the chains of biological limitations, was now a terrifying reality. As Elon Musk and his team pushed forward with their revolutionary plans for immortality and human enhancement, the stakes were higher than ever. What began as a dream to enhance human potential had now become a full-blown war, a war of ideals, ethics, and, most dangerously, power. Elon knew better than most that progress came at a price. But as the debate over immortality deepened and the global tensions mounted, the price was becoming too steep. The world was beginning to divide, not just over the right to live forever but over who controlled the future. The technology that Elon had worked so tirelessly to perfect was now in the hands of a few. MindLink, the key to unlocking the brain's full potential, had already begun transforming lives. Early adopters, some of the world's most brilliant minds, were now living with enhanced cognitive abilities. They could learn at lightning speed, solve complex problems with ease, and even interact with the digital world directly from their brains. But there were unintended consequences. While the wealthy and powerful reveled in their newfound abilities, others began to ask hard questions. What happens when only a select few can afford this technology? The divide between the rich and the poor was widening. And what about the dark side of immortality? If people could live forever, what would that mean for the balance of society? Elon's heart weighed heavy with the realization that progress, true, meaningful progress, came with a cost. As his vision took shape, it was becoming clear that the world's future wasn't as simple as just enhancing humanity. The world was changing, but not in the way he had hoped. In the months following the summit, the first casualties of the Immortality Project began to appear. While some celebrated the successes of MindLink, others saw the dangers and risks. One such case was that of Victor Owens, a wealthy businessman who had been among the first to undergo the MindLink procedure. Initially, Owens had been thrilled with the results. His cognitive abilities soared, and his influence grew exponentially. But soon, something started to shift. Owens began to grow more distant, more detached from reality. It was as though the mental enhancement was eating away at his humanity. He began to see the world as a chessboard, where every person was just a pawn to be manipulated. His moral compass disintegrated as his mind expanded, and before long, he became one of the most dangerous figures in the world, a man who was not just playing the game of power, but redefining it in his own image. Victor Owens wasn't the only one. Stories like his began to surface. Corruption, manipulation, and moral decay were becoming widespread among the enhanced elite. Immortality, it seemed, came with a price that no one had foreseen: humanity itself. As the rich and powerful continued to evolve beyond the constraints of their human bodies, the opposition grew stronger. The preservationists, once on the fringes, were now a force to be reckoned with. They argued that this technological evolution was going too far, threatening the very essence of what it meant to be human. The coalition, seeing an opportunity to reclaim power, began stoking the fires of rebellion. They funded new anti-immortality movements, organizing mass protests across the globe. The message was clear: humanity must remain mortal. The more people spoke out, the more the world seemed to fracture. Every country, every society was now at odds with itself. People weren't just divided on whether to embrace immortality, they were divided on the very nature of life itself. The rebellion began as a grassroots movement but quickly gained momentum. Small, underground groups formed, fueled by fear and resentment over the growing divide between the enhanced and the unenhanced. They called themselves the Humanists, and their goal was simple: to ensure that humanity remained human, untouched by the promises of immortality. The Humanists made their move. Armed with the knowledge that the elite were vulnerable to their own technology, they began targeting key figures, both in business and in politics, who had undergone MindLink enhancements. The ultimate goal was to create enough chaos to halt the Immortality Project and return the world to a state of natural order. Amid the chaos, Elon found himself caught between two opposing forces: the promise of progress and the dangers of unchecked power. His dream of a better, more enhanced humanity was slipping through his fingers. The world he had fought to build was now at risk of falling apart. And yet, he couldn't back down. He knew that immortality and enhancement were the keys to unlocking the full potential of human beings. They could evolve beyond the limitations of their bodies, become something more. But at what cost? Was it worth the suffering, the division, the destruction that was unfolding? The pressure mounted as world leaders, once allies, now began to turn against him. Governments sought to regulate or ban MindLink outright, fearing the social instability it was causing. Meanwhile, influential figures in the scientific community questioned whether humanity was ready for such a profound leap. Even those within Elon's own team began to ask if they had pushed too far, too quickly. Elon's leadership was tested as never before. Would he stand by his vision, knowing the potential harm it could cause? Or would he abandon the dream of a utopian future in favor of a more natural, human existence? As the rebellion grew more violent and the stakes became even higher, Elon was faced with an ultimatum: back down and allow humanity to evolve at its own pace, or double down on his vision and risk everything. The world was fracturing, and there was no clear path forward. In a moment of clarity, Elon made the decision to speak to the world directly, addressing the tension and confusion head-on. He stood before a global audience, his voice calm yet filled with conviction. "Progress is never without its risks," he began. "But without it, we are bound by the limitations of what we know, never daring to push beyond. The world is facing a choice between fear and evolution. We cannot halt the future, but we can guide it responsibly. It is not about immortality for immortality's sake. It is about empowering every human being to shape their destiny." The future was uncertain. The battle lines had been drawn, but there was no telling which side would emerge victorious. What was clear was that Elon's vision of immortality had changed the world forever. The question now was whether humanity would embrace that change, or whether it would be destroyed by it. Progress was no longer an abstract concept, it was a tangible force, one that could shape or shatter the world as they knew it. The price of progress was steep, and no one knew if they could afford it. We are standing at the edge of the abyss, staring down at our own future. The choice before us is not just about immortality, it's about whether we are willing to evolve, or disappear into the past. The world was now in turmoil. The rift between those who embraced the future and those who clung to the past had never been more pronounced. Elon Musk's vision for human enhancement, driven by the promise of immortality, had ignited a conflict that stretched across every corner of society. People were no longer just debating the ethics of immortality, they were fighting for the very soul of humanity. In every major city, protests raged. Humanists clashed with the enhanced. Governments were grappling with how to handle the digital immortality initiative, and the streets echoed with cries of both hope and fear. Some celebrated the future of limitless life, while others feared the consequences of humanity becoming unrecognizable. But as the battle lines hardened, one thing became crystal clear: the future was at a precipice. Elon's dream of a world where humans could transcend death was now entwined with the very survival of humanity. The choices made in the coming weeks would shape the trajectory of the human race, for better or for worse. The chaos reached a boiling point when the humanists launched their most significant attack yet, a coordinated series of cyber attacks targeting the infrastructure that supported the MindLink system. Entire cities were plunged into darkness as power grids were knocked offline. Data centers that housed the intricate algorithms of digital immortality were breached, causing widespread panic. Elon watched the chaos unfold on his screens, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. These were not just political battles, they were existential wars, where the very future of humanity was in play. "This is war, Elon," Lexa said grimly, her eyes locked on the screens as she analyzed the unfolding crisis. "If we don't act fast, this won't just be a technological failure. It'll be the end of everything we've worked for." Elon didn't need to be told. He knew that the stakes had never been higher. The humanists weren't just attacking technology, they were attacking his vision for the future. And now, with everything on the line, Elon found himself at a crossroads: continue down the path to immortality, knowing the dangers it posed, or abandon it in the face of mounting resistance. In the midst of the chaos, Elon decided to take a step back, to gain perspective. He needed to confront the consequences of the choices he had made, to see if there was any way to reconcile his vision with the realities that were now unfolding. With Lexa and a small team of scientists, Elon visited one of the rural centers that had resisted the rush toward technological advancement. It was a place where people still lived by old traditions, where technology had yet to fully infiltrate their lives. Here, in the quiet stillness of a pre-tech world, Elon found the answers he had been searching for. People lived simply, but there was a clarity to their existence that felt almost untouched by the noise of modernity. But as Elon walked among them, he realized something profound: they were not immune to the forces of change. They too had been affected by the allure of progress, by the whispers of a better life promised through technology. Their resistance wasn't born from a hatred of innovation, it was born from a fear of what might be lost in the process. A fear of losing their essence. Returning from the rural center, Elon faced the reality of his situation. He had always believed that humanity's future lay in the hands of technology, that the answer to life's greatest challenges could be found in enhancing the human mind and body. But now, he wasn't so sure. "The world is falling apart," Lexa said one evening as they sat in his office, watching the latest news reports. "Every step forward is being met with resistance. People are terrified, Elon. And we can't ignore that." "I know," Elon replied quietly, his fingers pressing against his temples as if trying to ward off the weight of the world. "But what if we stop? What if we choose to go backward and accept the limitations of humanity? What does that mean for everything we've built?" "That's the dilemma," Lexa said, her voice filled with equal parts compassion and concern. "You have always believed that humanity can evolve, that we can become more than we are. But what if this isn't evolution? What if it's something else, something that might destroy us?" Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The world was divided, and there was no clear path forward. But as he reflected on the events that had brought him here, he realized something: immortality was never just about escaping death. It was about transcending the limitations that defined human existence, but in doing so, it might also be creating new limitations. The world was changing rapidly, and Elon could feel the very fabric of humanity stretching to its breaking point. As the battle over immortality reached its crescendo, he found himself forced to make a choice that would determine the future of the human race: to evolve or to halt progress and return to a more familiar, more fragile existence. Elon had always prided himself on his ability to see the big picture, to make decisions that would shape the future of humanity. But now, with the world on the brink of chaos, he found himself seeking the advice of someone who had long warned about the dangers of immortality: Dr. Haruto Takahashi. The philosopher and bioethicist had been an early critic of Elon's vision, arguing that the pursuit of immortality could ultimately destroy what it meant to be human. Despite their ideological differences, Elon respected Takahashi's perspective and needed to hear his thoughts once more. "Dr. Takahashi," Elon began when they sat down in his office, "I need your help. The world is on the edge of collapse. Should we continue with the project, or should we stop? I need to know if there's still hope for what we've been trying to do." Takahashi's eyes met Elon's with a steady gaze. "Hope, Elon, is a tricky thing. It's not just about living forever. It's about living with purpose. Perhaps the real question is not whether immortality is possible, but whether humanity is ready for it. The choice you face now is not about the future of humanity. It's about the soul of humanity." In the stillness of that moment, Elon knew that he had reached the edge of extinction. The future was no longer certain. The road ahead was narrow, and the consequences of any decision were immense. But the time had come for him to make the hardest choice of his life. Would he push forward with the immortality project, risking the future of humanity? Or would he choose to embrace mortality, accepting that some things, some aspects of life, should remain beyond our control? As Elon Musk looked out over the world, now divided and teetering on the brink, one thought echoed in his mind: the future was never guaranteed, but it was his to shape. The world always changes, but not everyone is ready for it. The question is never whether we can afford immortality. The question is, can we afford to lose our humanity in the process? In the weeks that followed Elon Musk's speech, the world was plunged into chaos. The decision was made. The vision for immortality, once a dream shared by a small, select group of innovators, was now a global issue. The world was divided, and humanity's future hung in the balance. Elon's decision to push forward with MindLink and immortality was met with a mixture of celebration and fury. Some hailed him as a visionary, a man who had the courage to push humanity into an era of unprecedented advancement. Others saw him as a tyrant, a man too blinded by his own ambitions to see the devastating cost of playing with the very essence of what it meant to be human. The debates were fiery, the stakes were high, and the clock was ticking. The promise of eternal life was now a reality, but at what cost? The first few months after the decision were marked by massive global protests, both in support and in opposition to Elon's plan. In some regions, the wealthy elite celebrated their newfound immortality. They underwent the MindLink procedure, merging their consciousness with artificial intelligence to extend their lifespans indefinitely. These individuals became living embodiments of Elon's vision, symbols of a world where humans could outlast their physical bodies. But for the rest of humanity, life was becoming increasingly complicated. The humanists were growing louder, their protests turning from peaceful demonstrations to violent clashes with the enhanced. People were beginning to see the divide as a stark reminder of the haves and the have-nots, a world where the rich could live forever while the poor remained vulnerable to the forces of time and nature. As society began to fracture, the global economy was thrown into disarray. The technology companies that supported MindLink became the most powerful entities in the world. They controlled not just the future of life extension, but the digital infrastructure of society itself. Governments, struggling to maintain control, were faced with the impossible task of regulating immortality and ensuring that the technology didn't fall into the wrong hands. For Elon, the consequences of his decision were becoming painfully clear. The question was no longer whether immortality could change the world, it was whether humanity could survive the changes he had set in motion. The early success of MindLink seemed like a triumph. People who underwent the procedure became brilliant, their minds sharp and enhanced beyond human capabilities. Some had begun to cure diseases that had plagued mankind for centuries. Cancer, Alzheimer's, and other diseases that had once been life sentences were now vanishing. But as the enhanced grew more powerful, a darker truth began to emerge: immortality wasn't free. The longer people lived, the more they began to change. Their perceptions of the world grew distant. They saw time differently, as something finite, yes, but also elastic. The sense of urgency, the drive that made people work toward their goals in a limited lifespan, began to evaporate. The immortal had all the time in the world, and with it came a dangerous arrogance. They began to see themselves as above the rest of humanity, as though they were no longer bound by the same rules that governed everyone else. Elon was witnessing this firsthand. The wealthiest and most powerful figures, once humble in their ambitions, were now becoming godlike in their thinking. They began to push the boundaries of what was ethical. Some had begun to experiment with genetic enhancement, not just to prolong life, but to create new forms of life, merging human DNA with artificial constructs. It was in these early days that Elon realized something crucial: immortality didn't just change the body, it changed the soul. As the divide deepened, the resistance to Elon's vision grew stronger. The humanists, who had started out as small groups of activists, had now become a powerful movement. They were no longer just protesting immortality, they were fighting for the preservation of humanity itself. The humanists argued that immortality wasn't just a technological problem, it was a moral one. To them, the essence of being human was tied to mortality, to the idea that life was precious precisely because it was finite. Without death, life lost its meaning. They feared that in the pursuit of eternal life, humanity would lose its purpose, its soul, and ultimately, its humanity. Elon couldn't ignore the growing power of the humanists. They were gaining momentum across the globe, their rhetoric growing more impassioned, more radical. They had begun to attack mind-link facilities, sabotaging research centers, and even targeting high-profile immortals in an effort to destroy the technology that had brought them into power. It was a declaration of war, one that Elon had never anticipated. Amid the mounting chaos, Elon began to have his own crisis of conscience. He had spent years working toward the goal of human transcendence, a world where death no longer controlled the fate of individuals. He had believed, with all his heart, that immortality was the next step in human evolution. But now, with the consequences of his actions playing out in real time, Elon found himself questioning everything. Had he made a terrible mistake? He spent long nights reflecting on the human cost of his vision. The deaths of activists who had died trying to stop MindLink, the breakdown of global order, and the growing resentment from those left behind in the wake of immortality's arrival were all too much to ignore. In his most vulnerable moments, Elon began to wonder, was immortality worth the price humanity was paying? Or had he become too obsessed with progress, too blind to the fact that not all progress was worth pursuing? As the conflict reached a tipping point, Elon knew that the time had come for a new path. The world couldn't continue to live in the fractured state it had become. Something had to change. The question that now haunted him was no longer about whether immortality was possible. It was about whether humanity could reconcile its desire for eternal life with the values that had once made it human. Could there be a balance between technological advancement and the preservation of human essence? Elon had always prided himself on his ability to think beyond the present. But now, he understood that the future wasn't just about the boldest innovations. It was about ensuring that humanity's core, the spirit, the soul, was preserved in the face of change. The road ahead was uncertain. The price of immortality was steep, and no one knew if the world could afford it. When you look into the future, you don't just see a road. You see a choice, one that will change the path we walk forever. And sometimes, the hardest part of the journey is realizing that the future we're building is not just about technology. It's about humanity itself. The world was at a crossroads. A year had passed since Elon Musk's fateful decision to push forward with the MindLink program, a decision that had sparked global chaos, moral debates, and an irreversible shift in human society. The rift between the enhanced, the immortals, and the humanists, who believed in the sanctity of mortality, had deepened to an insurmountable divide. Elon watched the world unfold through his office window, the bustling streets of Los Angeles a stark contrast to the chaos that simmered in the hearts of humanity. The battle for the future was no longer just about the technology of immortality, it was about the very soul of humankind. The enhanced had flourished. The wealthy elite who had undergone the MindLink procedure were now beyond human, their minds capable of feats unimaginable just a decade ago. But with this newfound power came a dangerous arrogance. As they grew more isolated from the rest of humanity, their empathy began to fade. The world that they once sought to uplift had become a mere backdrop for their immortality. The humanists had also grown in strength, their movement swelling to a global force that now controlled large parts of the media, the political stage, and even elements of the military. They saw the immortals as a threat to the very nature of humanity, and they would stop at nothing to dismantle Elon's dream, believing that life's meaning was lost in the quest to live forever. But now, more than ever, Elon was facing the most difficult question of his life: was immortality worth the price humanity had paid? Was this new world, a world where immortals ruled, and the rest of society struggled to keep up, really the one he wanted to leave behind? Or was there another way? It was late at night when Elon found himself in the company of someone he had not seen in months, Lexa. The last time they had spoken, the world had seemed like it was teetering on the edge of disaster. Since then, Elon had spent his days locked in his labs, trying to refine the MindLink process, fix the gaps in his technology, and move closer to his vision of immortality. But with each passing day, he felt himself further disconnected from the very world he was trying to save. Elon, Lexa's voice broke through the silence of the lab. We need to talk. He looked up, her face drawn with worry, as if she too had been carrying the burden of their choices. What's on your mind? It's not just about immortality anymore, is it? She asked, her voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. It's about control. Power. And maybe, it's time we ask ourselves whether we've crossed a line. Elon stood up, walking to the window as he stared out at the city below. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure of the answer. There was a restlessness in the air, an underlying tension that seemed to hum through everything he had built. The immortals were untouchable, their lives now seemingly perfect, their minds expanding endlessly, while the rest of humanity struggled. I built this, Elon said, his voice breaking the silence. I thought this was the next step in human evolution. A chance for us to transcend, to become something greater. But now, I wonder if I was wrong. If we were wrong. Lexa's eyes softened. She stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. The problem, Elon, is that we forgot to ask one question. What's that? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. What does it mean to be human? She replied, her gaze locked on his. You've spent years searching for the answers in technology, but maybe the answers we've been looking for were right here all along. As the world continued to spiral, Elon made a decision that would change everything. The enhanced were powerful, yes, but they had become distant from the core of what made humanity strong: empathy, connection, and the ability to grow. Without these, immortality had become a hollow promise, a promise that didn't fulfill the deeper needs of the human soul. He gathered his closest team, including Lexa, and laid out his plan. The MindLink project would not be abandoned, but it would be revised. The limitless immortality he had once promised would now be tempered with balance. He would use the technology to enhance health, extend lives, but only within the limits of human experience, preserving the frailty that made life precious. The immortality process would no longer be about escaping death. Instead, it would be about living longer and better, in a way that preserved the human connection to time and memory, to the finite nature of existence. The people who underwent the procedure would not become gods, but they would remain deeply tied to the world they came from. And as for the humanists, Elon had a vision for reconciliation. The divide between the enhanced and the rest of humanity had to end. He would open the doors to the technology, allow it to be shared more equally, and ensure that no one group would ever have the power to control life and death. The future could be shared, not dominated. Elon's decision was met with both applause and resistance, but slowly, the world began to change. The immortality debate was no longer about whether humanity should pursue eternal life, it was about how to do so with humility, empathy, and understanding. The vision of a world where technology and humanity could coexist began to take shape. Over the years, the boundaries between the enhanced and the rest of society began to blur. The global divide that had once threatened to tear the world apart began to heal as people from all walks of life, whether enhanced or not, worked together toward a future that was more inclusive, more connected. And while immortality was still a reality, it was no longer the ultimate goal. Instead, the true achievement was living well, living with purpose, and embracing the fragile beauty of human life. Elon Musk stood at the center of a new world, a world where humanity had learned to live with its flaws, its imperfections, and its potential. His legacy was not the immortality he had once dreamed of, but the wisdom to understand that true immortality was not about escaping death, but about embracing life in all its forms. In the years that followed, Elon became more of a philosopher than a businessman. His conversations with world leaders, innovators, and everyday people were no longer just about technology. They were about values, about understanding the complex balance between progress and preservation. Humanity had not been destroyed by the pursuit of immortality. Instead, it had been saved by the realization that to live forever was not the ultimate goal, it was to live with purpose, to make each moment count. The future, Elon mused, was no longer a road to immortality. It was a journey toward becoming the best version of what it meant to be human. We can't predict every decision we'll make, but one thing is certain, we'll always learn from them. And sometimes, the biggest change isn't when we achieve what we set out for, but when we learn how to change what's been driving us. The final months of Elon Musk's journey weren't marked by groundbreaking innovations or resounding victories but by moments of self-awareness and transformation. After making the difficult but profound decision to adjust the MindLink program in order to preserve the essence of humanity, Elon realized that the ultimate goal wasn't the immortality of body or mind, but the immortality of the human values we've built over thousands of years. With the reforms to the MindLink program, Elon restored the balance between technological advancement and core human values. International cooperation programs were established to ensure the fair distribution of these technologies, preventing the societal divisions that could have been caused by their unequal use. This change opened a new era for humanity. Countries around the world began to merge technological power with understanding of human values. Doctors, scientists, artists, and world leaders no longer viewed each other through the lens of division but through the lens of collaboration and sustainable progress. Elon was no longer alone in this mission. He was no longer the only one holding the key to immortality or ultimate power. Instead, the path he had forged became a shared path for all of humanity, where everyone could take part in a better future. However, even as the world began to adapt to these changes, the old challenges still loomed. Movements against immortality and societal division remained, but instead of fierce conflict, they became part of a global dialogue. Disagreements were still present, but now they were driven by an attitude of openness and acceptance. Elon Musk, despite creating profound changes, knew that no solution was ever perfect. Sometimes, progress was an ongoing process, and humanity had to remain ready to adjust and learn from its mistakes. What mattered was that Elon's final reforms not only advanced technology but also allowed humanity to grow, emotionally, ethically, and intellectually. He had come to understand that immortality wasn't the ultimate goal, it was how we live, how we connect with one another, and how we learn from the ups and downs of life that create true value. On a quiet fall morning, Elon Musk stood on the rooftop of one of the tallest buildings in San Francisco, gazing out at the vast ocean. The sun's first rays reflected off the surface of the water, creating a stunning scene. He felt at peace, as if everything was finally back on course. In his hand was a phone, and on the screen was the final message from Lexa, his longtime companion throughout this tumultuous journey. The message was simple, yet profound. We can't change the past, but we can create a future that we and everyone else deserve. Elon read the message again and put the phone back in his pocket. He knew that the world would never be perfect, but what mattered was that humanity would never stop seeking improvement, striving for goodness in every decision. The world had changed, but not just because of the technological advances Elon had brought. It had changed because humanity had learned to live together, with all of its differences, flaws, and even its imperfections. Elon Musk stood there, feeling no longer troubled, because he had finally found something more eternal than immortality. It was humanity, the ability to change, and live meaningfully in every moment. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?